this particular stage of the build, I've determined that I'm going to be using mitered corner dovetails for the outside case joinery. The primary reason for doing so is so that I can hide the rabbet in the back of the case with a miter. I can make this rabbet without consideration for hiding it in tails or making a stopped rabbet, which will then weaken the tail joinery. There's a possibility that you can break out the top of the tail if you do that. And in a case like this, I like to avoid that entirely. Now, the front of the case will also have a miter. The reason being is that it's more aesthetically pleasing to have a miter surrounding the front door, in my opinion, than it is to have a lap joint or a butted joint. I would like to point out some of the details that I've chosen to incorporate in this. The primary one being that the grain of the cabinet runs completely throughout the top of the case. You'll see the opposing side has the remainder of this particular panel. I've laid out these dovetails to have a 14 degree angle. Now, because I don't have a dovetail marker specifically for 14 degree angles, I've chosen to simply set my sliding bevel and use that to lay out my dovetails. Being that this is a case, I like to use somewhat significant looking dovetails with thinner pins, so I've determined that I'll use an 1/8 of an inch gap between the tails, which works out to a pin that's about just shy of a 1/2 inch, where the top of the tail ends up being 1.5 inches. I'm also left with about the same on the end of the case here, at about 1.5 inches. Now, before I begin cutting out my dovetails, I'll point out a few things. Going to make the rip cuts with this particular Dozuki saw. It's about 14 teeth per inch. I'm then going to cross cut the ends with this one. This is a cross cut saw. You can see the tooth pattern there. Kind of. Rather than chopping out the waste, instead I'm going to cope out the waste. Because the coping saw I have has a blade that's actually thicker than that of the Dozuki saw, I'm going to split the waste, cut it out to the bottom, and then turn the saw and cut off the bottom of that. As a guide, especially for case-size dovetails, I like to use a square laid on the bench right in front of me, and I can use it as a visual reference. Before I begin cutting, I'll make mention that there's always error when you are making things by hand, and so as a craftsman you have to determine exactly where you'd like the error to be. In this case, I'd rather err on the side of making a tapered dovetail that tapers as it joins than to do the opposite and make one that tapers away. So when I choose to make my cuts, I'll keep that in mind. Once I have my angle set, I like to make all the same cuts. made my saw cuts for the tails, I'm going to use my coping saw to remove the waste. I'm going to start on one cut, make my way down, over, and take out half the waste. Turn the saw around. And then saw to the opposing corner. And now that we've removed the waste, I've repositioned the piece so we can begin sawing the mitered corners. At the next stage of this process, we're going to be chopping out the waste. I'd like to point out the chisel that I'll be using. It's the ginkgo leaf style chisel. Normally these are for half-blind dovetails, but I actually like using them for both full blind, half-blind, and also standard dovetails just like these. Now I begin the process by chopping away from the waste and then putting the chisel right on the line. And I'm going to be chopping about halfway through. Creates a slight undercutting effect, but in this particular scenario, it's appreciated. You may notice that I'm not using an overly heavy chisel. I don't need to take a really heavy cut, and because of that, I don't want to use a particularly heavy chisel. You may notice that I'm positioning the chisel with my right hand. And this is mostly frowned upon, however, in this scenario, we're dealing with waste that's about a 64th of an inch or less. It's very hard to position it by walking the chisel. And so, I have a quick procedure of positioning it exactly where I need it with my right hand while still holding my hammer. It's faster to walk the chisel, however, if I make an error, I will see it forever in the inside of this case, and so I'd like to avoid doing that. Now that we've chopped out the waste down to the baseline, I just want to quickly pare and make sure that there's nothing hanging out above the baseline that's going to cause an issue.